Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of Leading with Gen AI. Geoff is here in the UK. Rob's here. Rob's just got back from SLUSH. We're going to kick off with him in a minute. And I'm here up in Eastern Finland. I was down actually in Helsinki at SLUSH with some investors as well. But we've got a packed agenda here today. And what we're going to do is let Rob take it away with his first person report from what he got up to, what he heard at SLUSH down in Helsinki.
Thanks, Pat. Yeah, and I've literally just driven back from Helsinki as well in the slush. Um, First day or two, it was actually sunny, and everybody was like, "Wow, this is amazing." And I said, "No, it's going to come." Big storm came, and there you go. And what I want to sort of feed back on is really the AI content for Slush. But I think actually the difficulty is what didn't involve AI at Slush. Uh, so that was quite interesting. So there was set the scene. There's 13,000 people who came to Slush. 3,000 of them are investors, and yeah, and it's a big sort of nightclubby type feel and big stages and these big names from the US, etc., and all very well orchestrated. But I think also some of the gems were from the 500 side events that were going on, which covered so many different things. So I'm not going to be able to tell you everything for sure. And I'm still unpacking a lot of stuff as well. But there's a few things I wrote some notes as I was going through the week. First off, there was a really I won't name him, but a very prominent person in cybersecurity. I've known of him for years, seen him speak many times, and actually got a chance to talk on one a lot. And it started with him saying how he's much more we started talking about efficiency and being effective and the difference between the two, because we know from the old days of big data, etc., people would always talk about efficiencies, and you don't sell an efficiency, you sell an effective outcomes. And I was asking what he's personally using as well, and he's using something called Coconote, and I know there's other stuff out there as well, but I didn't realize how good it was at summarizing videos. So he's using it to summarize a lot of the videos that he gets sent all the time. And then someone else in this audience that we had with this group of, I would say more like enterprise level companies. So, a lot of them were like, Salesforce customers, etc., using big solutions. And they were talking about how we laughed at first, the guy facilitating, when they said they can do more meetings. It's great. AI allows you to go more meetings. Like, no, we don't want more meetings. It allows us to summarize more meetings. So you can basically go through the video playback of the meetings with a tool to summarize it for you and not have to 24/7 be in meetings, or dare I say it, a modern way of not necessarily being that focused on the meetings you're in either, right? So Coconut was interesting, but then I came up with the question regarding privacy and handling confidential information. Is like, you've signed an NDA, I've got access to a data room. Do I really want to be uploading all of this into ChatGPT to summarize it for me, or whatever tool I'm using? And here's one of the leading global people on data security basically said, well, look, if you're using Microsoft, if you're using you've got AMD in your machine and all the rest of it, and then if you're using, something from a bona fide company like ChatGPT, they've got so many opportunities that they wanted your data anyway. He basically said not to worry about it. Yeah, and I thought that was quite refreshing. Now, a few of the lawyers and things in the room were sort of, muttering at that point. But as it turned out, most of the people in that room had their own enterprise GPT, for example. But I suspect when it comes down to it, smaller businesses, consumers, etc., the type of businesses that we're using and uploading our information to, they would have had plenty of other opportunity. And they're not going to, in his words, they're not going to destroy their business model by using your data, outside of permissions.
Yeah, I did.
And before I get into anything else that happened, I just wondered what the view is from both of you on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, isn't it? It's the because I've spent quite a lot of time looking at this recently for some clients, particularly around the Microsoft platform, and I've said it before on this podcast. I'll say it again. Microsoft has done an incredible job with all the security and data privacy around Copilot, and the very short version of it is that if you're happy to have your corporate data on SharePoint, OneDrive, in Outlook email, there is no reason you wouldn't use Copilot because it's all aligned to exactly the same security standards and privacy standards. Microsoft's just made a change in October where they've got this enterprise data protection that applies to all the Copilot chats. So you can put anything in there. And I think it's a really good message for people trying to roll out an AI assistant tool like Copilot, ChatGPT, and so on, is that you can just say to your staff, here's an approved tool, and we know where all the data is. And even down to the level with Microsoft where if you're inside the EU, it will respect the EU data boundary as well, and you know exactly where that data is. So I think this is really, really important. And the other side of that, I guess, Rob, to your point, where this chap was saying, well, they've got your data anyway. There's a thing there, isn't there? You remember the old adage about you never get fired for buying IBM. Well, maybe there's a thing we could reboot this one from what was that? That was like the 1980s or something. That was around.
Yeah.
We'll reboot that one, which is you won't get fired for using a big vendor's AI solution, right? Because if you've got evidence to the authorities as to how you secured it and why you had personally identifiable information in an AI solution, it's going to be much easier to say, well, we were using Microsoft's tools or Salesforce's tools or whoever's tools they were to process data with AI. And well, they've got access to all our data anyway because it's all sat on Salesforce, it's all sat in Dynamics, it's all sat on SharePoint or wherever that is. I suppose there's an element of that there,
but and we're talking about and what I've been talking about really is tools that will do things like summarizing your data. Now we can get into some other areas in terms of there are other areas of data where you definitely do need to think about protection. So I also went to a media IP event. And one of the panelists was been working in the legal framework as a lawyer in this area. But there was that's another thing because there's still a big open question about where the liability is. So when I'm talking about just, accessing someone's data room or something like that and doing some analysis for an investment or something, I'm not sharing anything on. Yeah, I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm not trying to commercialize anything. Now, it's very different when we're talking about, using GenAI to create an avatar, a voiceover for an ad or a movie or a game or something like that, where you really do need to have the permission of the artist. And it's the approval of the artist, which is where it gets a bit confusing as well. So say, for example, we've got an artist that allows you to clone their image or their voice, etc. They'll still need to approve where it's used, in what context. There might be areas that they don't want it to be used, etc. Now, so that's obviously copyrighted if they're doing a recording. Now, if it's 100% AI generated, that's where the IP gets a bit grey. But typically, if you're dealing with an artist, they're the IP owner, and then there's a rights distribute. Then there's a content producer, and then there's the tech AI provider. And does the liability, if this gets into the wrong hands, is that liability with the content producer or the tech AI provider? So it sounds like some of this is still a bit confusing. So there was one firm there.
This is for rights problems, though, Rob. You described.
Yeah.
This is for rights.
There's one company there, 30 years, right, in doing media. They've done cassettes, CDs, through to streaming and all that stuff. And they're just saying, look, we'll survive, we'll find a way, and it's fine.
Yeah, Pat, did you have thoughts on this thing about the data and the big vendors?
I think you touched on the point, and Rob earlier. It's like we already put so much stuff into those kind of big vendors, and like Rob quoted the security guy from SLUSH saying that if they wanted to, they could take advantage of it, but it would kill their business overnight probably if they did, because word would get out, and they would destroy all of their reputation. So I don't see it. I don't see it as a problem. I think actually there's more concern. I have a lot of conversations with SMEs. They tend to be a little bit more nervous of this than the bigger enterprises, because obviously, or maybe they just have direct access to, more information on this. But I think the smaller companies are more nervous about putting their data up there. But maybe there needs to be some kind of marketing push by these big vendors to say, hey, you can trust us.
Yeah, I think Microsoft have done quite a lot of that with this change I was talking about with Copilot and the data privacy. Although it seems to have sort of slipped by, people notice it. It's an interesting point, Pat, about the SMEs. Maybe because they feel more responsible for it. Whereas when you work for a big enterprise, you're kind of going, well, there's somebody else somewhere is looking at that. Someone in group legal or whatever, or the data privacy people have looked at it. And that's not my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse is this particular problem I've got to do on a daily basis. I mean, it's interesting. I'm doing an AI roadmap for a quite large firm at the moment, and I've just completed the discovery calls with them. And I've spoken to probably about 10 or 12 different people now. And there's this anecdotal evidence that the use of ChatGPT is rife across that business. And I said to the CTO, who's the guy I'm working for there, about this, and he went, "Yeah, I'm not surprised at all." And this is, I think, is a big risk around data, is that if you don't have an approved tool that you're giving to your staff, they're going to go off freelancing, right? Because everybody, as soon as you start using a ChatGPT or whatever the tool is, you see the benefits of it, and it's kind of like, well, why wouldn't I do this? And I think it's really, really important. And probably the biggest risk here actually is not doing something. And you've got to get approved tools in place with an acceptable use policy, so that you know exactly where it is. Because as you said, Rob, the data's sat in your tenant, for example, in Microsoft or in Salesforce, Google, or wherever. And if that's where you want to keep it, you need to keep it there and give people tools to use. Otherwise, they will go off freelancing and using stuff. But, just on that Cocoa Note thing, Rob, you're just talking about there, I find this stuff really interesting. This roadmap I've just been doing, for example, I've used Microsoft Copilot because of all the data privacy stuff we've talked about. I used Microsoft Copilot, transcribed all the calls, and then used that for meeting summarization. And, probably like you guys, I've done tons of discovery workshops over the year. And you know what it's like when you're sort of sat there and you're sort of trying to listen and write at the same time. And normally you have to take two people into these kind of workshops to make sure you capture everything. And it's, you're constantly trying to write stuff down as quickly as possible and asking them to recap. It's just absolutely brilliant. It's a really different experience when you know this is all going into the transcript. And if you miss something, you can just go back and look it up in the transcript later, which is just really cool. It completely revolutionizes the workshopping experience.
Yeah, just a quick one, because I have a lot of calls with my colleagues in the US, and what happens is about 5 or 6 of us maybe join the meeting. And there's 2 or 3 of these kind of meeting recording apps in progress. So everyone's got their own thing that they're using to analyze the output of the meeting, and they're all slightly different. I think this is Otter AI, and then there's a couple of others. So it's kind of interesting that everyone's bringing their own one. Plus, you get the one that's kind of baked into whichever platform the meeting's on at the time. So. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be cool if they then have an agent that comes up with the actions and they help each other with the actions and you don't have to do anything, right? That would be good.
It's coming, Rob.
Exactly, yeah.
It's coming.
It is coming, mate. Yeah.
So without going, I won't go as deep into some of the other stuff that I saw, but some of the things that I thought was cool. I mean, from that media event, I didn't realize there was, during the Olympics, the Paris Olympics, they had this company that I saw, and they didn't want to name names, but they basically did 7 billion personalized messages. So they had a personality that they cloned. So you'd get a personalized message. So it'd be like, hey, Geoff, you probably want to watch the running at 3 o'clock or something, right? I just thought that was really cool. The other one is Business Finland organized a remote sensing.
Did they? Sorry, Rob. That's really interesting, because I think this hyper personalization thing is super interesting.
Yeah.
What was the ROI on 7 billion personalized messages? Did they measure it and see, they got an increase in watched minutes?
To be honest with you, they didn't really want to get into too much detail, and I got a feeling that the lady said it and then probably realized she probably sort of said anything in the first place. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, I wonder. I think really the return on investment in general, from what that business does, it's all about driving advertising numbers so that they can basically show at this particular time we had this many people interested, etc. So it really was very old-fashioned, driving advertising revenue by saying we can guarantee there's going to be X number of people watching this event at this time with these interests. Yeah. So yes, it's personalized, but it's that data to say we managed to get Geoff to come and watch the running along with the other 5 million people. That, and then the advertisers would be go, okay, fine, here's your money. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, Business Finland did something on remote sensors. That was quite cool. There was a couple of really big players there, but basically showing real-time weather predictions. And it was interesting for me because there was one company there quite well known, who have showed things like, the rain clouds and stuff like that. And this other company came up and said, it shows there's rain in the cloud, but you don't know it's raining. And everything that we're going to talk about technology today and photonics and all the rest of it. He said the most accurate way to tell if it's actually raining or not is with a bucket still, some bucket test, because you can look through the cloud, etc., but you can't see if it's actually raining. Anyway, there was just lots of very cool things there. The reason I bring that up, because we talked about startups hacking and being a bit more carefree, SMEs being a bit nervous, enterprises taking care of it and having their own GPTs, etc. But then this was at a governmental level. So these are governments basically supplying data, using the data and using these predictive models for things like storms and all the rest of it. But even with that, some of these companies were still struggling to get data back from their clients. So, I know, Geoff, you've used the term moats and things in the past, but this is why a startup from nowhere isn't necessarily going to be able to come in and compete, because it's taken these quite well-established, very well-funded companies with good government connections and, the weather officials and all that, or whatever it is. But to be able to get the data back out from those agencies is hard. So they'll buy stuff from you, but they won't necessarily give you the data back. When they get the data back, the models are exponentially better.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
And being effective. So they find out, was that data effective? What was the outcome? Did they manage to clear off the snow off the road faster or not? Because you need to get the reports back too.
Yeah, it's an interesting point about data, isn't it? And this is something we were sort of chatting on. I think you made a good point here, Rob. Is that where you think the moats would be in the AI space, they're not. I think probably 2 years ago, we probably all thought, what OpenAI had done with ChatGPT was a moat, and it was incredible technology. And then very, very quickly, you've got Claude Mistral and particularly XAI and what Elon Musk did, and how quickly they built Grok and got that up and running. And you thought that would be a moat, would be owning a foundation model, and actually clearly it isn't. It's just down to how many billions of dollars you could lob at it and how many NVIDIA GPUs you get. But I do think you're right. I think this data is a moat, and it's data location, data residency, as we were just talking about earlier with your Microsofts, your Salesforces, all that kind of stuff. And I mean, I've certainly done enough of these programs. Migrating data is an absolute pain. And if you can avoid having to migrate data, move data anywhere, then you will, because it's so painful and it doesn't really add any business value. The business value is what you do with the data, isn't it? And I think, that moat is going to be all of these big players like your Microsofts, your Salesforces, all of these kind of organizations who've got the data already. That's where you're going to stick. And I find this really interesting that people keep building these new products, and there was one I saw this week. So it's a good friend of mine who works for the National Health Service here in the UK in like process improvement and efficiency and that sort of thing. And he said to me, "Oh, have you seen this tech?" And he sent me through this link. I won't name the company because it's a bit unfair, but what they've got is a very, very neat solution, right? And what it does, it's for GP practices, so primary care providers. And the main feature it has is it records the conversation and transcribes the conversation automatically between a physician or a doctor and the patient. and then summarizes the notes and then puts it into a system, and then you can do patient management in their system and all of that kind of stuff. And I looked at it and I went, okay, that's interesting. And you look down the cast of characters, and there's some really good people. There's physicians, there's some lots of machine learning and data science people there. At PhD level, brilliant team of people. They've raised a significant sum of money from a very large VC firm. I'm not going to say all the details of who it is because someone will be able to go work out who I'm talking about here. But it's one of the big name VC firms who's backing it. And I looked at it and I went, why wouldn't you just use Microsoft Copilot? Because you could use it. We've just talked about data privacy and security. The NHS has a UK-wide agreement with Microsoft to use the Microsoft technologies, the Office, the M365 stack. You could just use Microsoft Copilot to record and transcribe, get your meeting notes, and then you just put it into via some sort of integration. Power Automate would probably do it for you. Some sort of integration to put it into your current patient management system. And the thing in the NHS as well, which is in the primary care, is there's about 2 or 3 big solution providers who do the primary care case management systems or patient management systems, and they're all integrated together. So when you get referred to a hospital to go and get some tests done, or you get some blood tests done, all of this system's all linked up, and all the data flows around automatically. So if you want to migrate off that and bring in another solution from a little startup, you don't have all those integrations with the rest of the NHS. And it comes back to your point, I think, Rob, here, which is that the person who's going to win here is the one who's got the data and the least friction process.
Yeah,
and
who's got access to the data, who's trusted, and dare I say it, if you've got a stronger enterprise software salesperson than an innovation culture within your business, it's probably easier to buy it from someone than being given the freedom to go with it, because the guideline tells you can't do that, right? You're not allowed to, transcript the patient conversation or whatever it might be. And then that brings us into things like regulations as well. And if there, there was a US VC that was saying that he thought that the EU regulations were too stifling. They were holding back innovation as well. And when we talk about moats and things, sometimes we're talking about barriers in terms of, we don't want to have barriers for innovation, sure, but we also want, if we're pumping a lot of money into developing something new, you also want to have some protection as well, and know that not everybody can come and compete with you. So that's why, being a trusted vendor, having access to the data, maybe being cost effective, because you're not going to go and be able to sell very expensive enterprise software in the example you gave, perhaps, because there is an alternative.
Yeah, and Rob, what's your thought on this? Because you work as a venture partner as well. Is you see these startups with really great novel ideas, but whenever I see these, I sort of sit back and I look at it and I think, could I do that with ChatGPT or insert a name of other AI assistant? And if I can't today, could I within 6 months? And are they just going to lose their market because Microsoft will go, that's a good feature, we'll stick that into Copilot, Google with Gemini, and so on?
That's always a risk. That is the same as it's always been in software and technology. How much it will cost for me to produce it myself? Do I have the teams within my team? Do I have the innovation to come up with the ideas? Do I have a team that will be able to develop it? And do I have a team that will be able to change the culture for people to adopt and use it as well? And there will be some companies that get eaten alive very quickly. So you've always got to be looking to see what's they're in. And it might be, as we were talking about earlier, is that they have access to certain data, or people trust them to send the data back to them as well. Yeah, it's working both ways. And then it's just things as simple as maybe changing the UI or something like that. Because I mean, I don't know, your colleague and your friend in the NHS is, do they already have approved devices that they use so that they don't have to be typing and they're listening in on, and is it compatible with it or something? So you're always just looking to make it very easy, and specific domain knowledge as well, so that people aren't having to model things or change the UI or whatever it is. So it's already modeled for that domain will help. So it's about the execution and the implementation. Yeah.
It is, and I agree with your point there, Rob, about the fact that it's always been this way. Somebody like an IBM, a Microsoft, or whomever could come and eat your lunch, right? That's always been the case for a startup. I just kind of think in this current market with Gen AI solutions, the rate at which stuff is developing, and the speed at which they can add features. Okay, so you look at, Anthropic put in that feature. I forgot what they called it now, but with the canvas that comes up, it's now called the canvas in ChatGPT. Microsoft has got pages in within in Copilot. As soon as you see something like that, it's happening even quicker that those big vendors will come in and eat your lunch.
Yeah, true. Yeah, the rate will always increase. One other event I went to was around ports and port innovations, and that was really cool. And I don't mind naming them because it's good, they're doing a good job. And it's a Port of Antwerp. Actually, it's two ports. I can't remember the other one. They're working together now, and they're basically, how would a startup go and work with someone like that? This might be quite hard, but there are some other ports doing this. I think they do the similar thing in Singapore, and I think they do a similar thing in Port of Rotterdam, where they're both effectively investor VC on technology that would benefit their port, but allow people to come in. And they talked about the challenges of new things. And this is sort of, Pat's area with things like drones, right? So they're using drones for quickly clearing up oil spillage and stuff like that. But it took them years to convince the regulators to let them have drones flying out of the line of sight and those sort of things. But the fact that you've got these big credible organizations then working as an ecosystem and allowing small startups to come in was really cool. So a new startup can come and eat the big companies for lunch. But the nice thing is you're also seeing not necessarily big companies, but some bigger organizations helping those startups. But there will be a barrier to the next startup who comes. They're not necessarily going to be able to go and take over for them because they've been part of this, domain-specific accelerator ecosystem or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I actually just wanted to build on what Rob said because that ecosystem port thing, part of the ecosystem is also the local university. So, for example, in the city of Kotka in Finland, the port of Hamina-Kokko is a very big port. And what they do is they do a lot of experimentation around drones and other technologies with ZAMK, which is the technical university, which has, a campus in Kotka. So very much you get these universities driving also a lot of spin out activities with ports. And I think it probably happens with airports, but especially with these seaports. And I think there's a big focus on it as well, around protecting critical infrastructure and doing inspections and things like that, given what's been going on in the news over the last year or so. Yeah. Okay, so thanks for that, Rob. And I know that you must be pretty knackered because you just drove 5 hours probably in the snow after Slush. So thank you very much for those insights. And now I think what we'd like to do is actually touch on one of the other big stories that's been kicking around. And I'm not sure if it's a meme. Geoff's got some pretty strong opinions, and that is around this whole LLM scaling laws thing. It's started off somewhere, I don't know, on YouTube early in the week, even got picked up by the mainstream media. Personally, my opinion is that I don't care. I'm much more interested in what's coming along next in terms of new abilities for solving, physics problems and discovering new materials and manufacturing processes, all this kind of stuff that DeepMind and OpenAI are going to be doing. And so my opinion on this is I don't really pay much attention to these kind of laws like Moore's law. But Geoff, I'm going to bring you in now, see what you have to say. I'm going to put you on the hot spot.
I've never been known for not having a strong opinion about things, Pat. That's for sure. So, I mean, look, I think you're right, Pat. I think you're absolutely right. It is. When I've been hearing about this all week, and I think part of the problem you've got these days is there's so many podcasts about Gen AI and so many newsletters and all of this kind of stuff, and and Twitter feeds and so on. These guys are always just chasing stuff, and it's quite funny because I've got loads of these newsletters that pop up in my mailbox, and you kind of go, which one's going to get it first? And then they all seem to copy each other and pick up on these themes, and it just becomes this echo chamber where they're just going round and round and round and all this kind of stuff. I sort of read it, I heard it, and I went, do you know what? I don't know the answer, and I don't really care actually. I think what I do know is there's very, very bright people working on these problems, and they're working through it. all of the guys I know who are and girls who are really good data scientists and have been in the machine learning world forever will always tell you it's not easy. And the stuff he thinks easy isn't, and the stuff he thinks going to be hard often isn't, and that becomes easier. He said, you just don't know, and you go into solving machine problems with machine learning and deep learning, and sometimes it works well, and sometimes you just don't get the result you think you're going to get. But what I think more importantly is, and I wrote a blog on this like months ago about, do we need GPT-5? Because everyone's getting carried away about GPT-5. A year ago, everybody was talking about we should have had GPT-5 and it's going to launch before the end of 2023. You know what? If the technology stops now and we just had the current LLMs that we have, whether it's Gemini, GPT-4o, O1 preview, and so on, it's good enough, and we need to build really good products around them. And there's amazing things we haven't even scratched the surface of yet. I think you could build out some pretty good agent capabilities using the current GPT tech that we've got that's there. You could definitely, large enterprise, all the ones I work with, haven't even really got started in anger yet on using all these technologies. So I agree with you. I think it is I like that term. Did I just hear you use that, Pat? You said lamestream media. Is that what you just said? I quite like that. and it's just like, people just picking up these kind of stories. What I do think is interesting is the kind of novel approaches. So you look at the GPT-01 preview they did, and effectively it's kind of, they've done something a little bit more clever with chain of thought, but everybody's been doing chain of thought for most of this year when people worked it out. And I think that's pretty cool, isn't it? It's just to think about these technologies. And the final thing I'll say as well, it always occurred to me that when the US government started putting these restrictions in on selling NVIDIA GPUs to China, the Chinese are going to get very, very good at building out LLMs and AI technology with what they've got, because the scarcity creates through necessity, isn't it? Will create amazing solutions. So I've always thought that would be what would happen, and there's plenty of evidence that the Chinese are doing that. So yeah, I think it's a bit of it's a nothing burger story, isn't it?
Very good. Anything on your mind, Rob, on this? Or are you sitting this one out, mate?
Yeah. I like to think it's all a bit of magic, right? And through, I don't know, quantum computing or whatever, someone's going to sprinkle some magic fairy dust on it, and yeah, it's all scalable. There's nothing to worry about, nothing to see here.
Okay, so yeah, thanks for that. Just want to close out with any other final takeaways from you, Rob.
Yeah, not that AI specific, but as I say, AI is everywhere. So one just personal highlight for me is I've been a fanboy of Verge motorcycles for a while. So they're an EV bike, but they are very AI rich. So you've got radar and computers, and you've got over the air updates and all the rest of it. And so, like I say, I've been a fanboy of that. But for the rest of you, they launched something called Donut Labs, and now they did a brilliant video. I'll put a clip on the comments, but they did a brilliant video of off-road, on-road, and in the air, using basically their very special EV motor, but the whole thing that goes with it. So I attended their launch event with a friend who's a patent attorney, who was like, yeah, that hardware looks really credible. And I mean, I've even made the bikes, but he was worried about the software. But the guy who came up with the company in the first place, his background is very successful in the software area, and I know that's going to be really fun to see how AI will change our experiences beyond just autopilot on a Tesla. But we're talking off-road, we're talking helicopters, all sorts of stuff. Really cool.
Yeah. I miss my Aprilia. I don't know if I could go to an electric one, but we'll see. Hey, Geoff, anything final for you?
No, all good. Lots of great topics to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. In that case, what we're going to do is we're going to close it out now, and I want to thank Rob especially for racing back north from SLUSH and giving us that report. Geoff, as always, for your detailed analysis and insights. And from me, Pat Halford, we'd like to say thank you very much for listening in. If you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to Leading with Gen AI, and we'll be back very, very soon. Thanks.